like genuinely so much for doing this. I always love talking to people, and you're somebody that's been in the community for a little while, and I've never really had a chance to talk to you. So it's great to get this chance today. So I always ask people sort of more or less the same question at the beginning of my interviews, which is, what brought you to the SE community? What sort of got you here?
Well, obviously, I'm going to say I have seen, Anthony's videos. That's kind of like the I've been watching him for years.
One of these days, somebody's going to say they saw my videos, and that's good.
But I actually,
but of course,
in terms of coming to the community, I followed somebody here, a vegan activist, that came to the Discord server and said he was going to be talking to some people about veganism. So I just like sparked my curiosity and wanted to hear what he had to say, and how he'd do in the SE community. So knowing what I know about it, I didn't know whether it was going to go very well or not. So yeah, and
so you had heard of it through Anthony's videos before, and then but then you hadn't actually joined the Discord community, but you followed your vegan friend here. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think I watched quite a lot of Anthony's videos in like 2016, 17, 18, that sort of era. So yeah,
cool. And so what do you think, what was it about your internet search history that encouraged YouTube to throw Anthony's videos at you? What is it about you that YouTube thought would be interested in this?
Well, interestingly enough, I used to do street interviews, and I do have a YouTube channel, which I don't really upload to anymore. It's a bit, I don't know, I find my videos a bit cringe now. Everyone does, I suppose, don't they?
Yes,
so
100% everybody does.
So I used to do street interviews about veganism, and I used to kind of be a vegan activist. Well, I was. So kind of along the lines similar to like Earthling Ed, that kind of style of street interviews. So it was, kind of using Socratic method, but more sort of like hard style SE, like you're leading them to a conclusion or you're trying to persuade them, it's that kind of style of interview that I had experience with.
Right.
And then a friend of mine said, oh, you need to check out Anthony's videos. Like, he's really cool. Like, see what he does. He's kind of different. Might give you a few pointers, so you could probably learn from him. So I started watching those.
That's cool. So do you still do the vegan activism?
Not so much anymore. Not for any particular reason, just COVID, lockdown, and then I just didn't really have very much motivation to go out there and speak to the public so much anymore. Yeah, I don't know whether I might do that again, but since being in the SE community, it's kind of got me sort of changing. Like it's just got me thinking about everything. Like, what are my priorities now? What do I want to do? What's effective? What's an effective style of activism now? Like, do I even want to do that anymore? Yeah, so it's throwing up a lot of questions for me at the minute. Yeah.
So what would you describe the difference between how you would approach a conversation with your previous vegan activism street interviews and how you might approach one now that you've sort of drunk the street epistemology Kool-Aid?
It's hard, because how do you get someone? Because if you've got like sort of like an agenda, if you've got a point to put across, then I don't know if you can't use SE to do that. Do you know what I mean? It's either got to be like persuasion and get them to see your point of view, or in the context of veganism or animal rights, get them to see the animal's perspective, or you don't do that at all and you ask them question, like what are your claims? Like, do you have any claims? Let's go into them. Let's explore them. So I don't know if the two can go together. I don't know if there's anything that I can pick out from SE that I could use apart from just like the Socratic kind of style of questioning, like which I've got experience with anyway. So yeah.
So would you say that there are good reasons, rational reasons, why every human being on the planet would be better off being vegan than not vegan?
There are. However, just recently, because of SE and the community, I've been trying to think of steelman arguments for the other side. and trying to use like the best rationalizations I can for the, I say the other side. It's not like, it shouldn't be like us and them. Do you know what I mean? That's
Exactly.
one thing. But just like the best rationalizations or steelmans for eating meat, like why eating meat might be ethical. And to me, that's like, I can't swallow that pill. You know, that's because what led me to become vegan in the first place was this strong sense of empathy towards animals. And you know, like with empathy follows, you know, you can get quite angry and upset and frustrated. So yeah, sorry, I can't remember what your original question was now.
No, that's great. So I think it's difficult when you're addressing a sort of moral claim. Moral claims seem to comport very much to values, right? And they can sometimes feel like if you don't already value this thing, then it's very difficult for me to give you a reason to value it. If you've decided you don't value this thing, then it's hard for me to other than just saying you're wrong to not value it. But there are, I think, rational. I'm not a vegan. I've been a vegetarian at some point in my life, but I'm currently not a vegetarian. And even though I'm not a vegan, I recognize that there's an inherent irrationality to my positions on this. You know, I don't want to see animals harmed. I do not like the idea of the sort of factory farming, industrial farming of animals. I think it's hugely disagreeable. And yet at the same time, I find eating meat genuinely pleasurable. I mean, that's just a reality to it, right? And so so the question is like, how much can I be truly rational and hold those two views, right? Because I know by eating meat, I'm supporting an industry that is causing the suffering and pain of animals that if I was really fully cognizant of and really honest with myself, I'd have to say didn't justify the deliciousness of my dinners. And that's a really interesting problem because it's an example of me at least recognizing that it isn't entirely justifiable and rational, but I'm still doing it. Like I'm aware of it, but I'm still doing it. So I think one of the things that when we talk about activism and sort of promoting and trying to change people's views to a specific position, I think if you honestly believe that your position is rational, that there are good reasons to believe what you believe, then I think you don't have to have the agenda of specifically changing their mind to your position. You just have to have the agenda of honestly encouraging them to reflect rationally on what they believe. Because in doing so, they will eventually come to what you believe, or you believe they will eventually come to your conclusion also. And that's not as direct as I think persuasion can be. You know, it doesn't feel as effective in the moment, but I think it's probably more long-term effective. How do you feel about that? Do you think that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking about this over the last few days about like, can I rationalize my position, or am I just being like, am I crazy? Do you know what I mean? Because like, I always worry that people think I'm crazy. I had thought about it for many years as well, but just recently it's just come to light again. Like, do I have good reasons for doing this? Like, have I thought it through? Which I have. I don't really feel like it's just a belief. I feel like there is, for every single part of it, I've thought about, well, it seems extremely plausible that animals do suffer, and I don't want to contribute towards that. I'm about 95% confident that animals suffer because they have the same, they have a brain, they have a heart, they have a nervous system, all the things that humans have. So I guess I don't have to justify it, but I can rationalize why that is my position, I guess, and explain it if I get asked. I don't really have to.
I think we do have to justify it. Would you say why do you feel that we don't have to justify it?
Well, yeah, exactly. In the same way that if I go and like kill someone, I have to justify why as well. But there doesn't seem to be like a whole identity around like anti-murder or anti, child molestation, stuff like that. But there is around veganism, and there's a stigma around it. I don't know if you've noticed.
Somewhat, yes.
There is a stigma, like the sort of the militant vegan, the activists, they shout really loud and they annoy people in restaurants and things like that. So I
This is a massive problem where people conflate ideas to identities, and the moment somebody becomes the idea, that they feel that the idea is their identity, they tend to behave very badly in response to that conflation. But it also means that you also somehow subsume all of the bad behavior. If you happen to hold the same idea, you're assumed to have that identity, which means that your characteristics are going to be similar to their characteristics, which of course is totally nonsense, and it's not true. So I think there's a huge difference between somebody who honestly reflects and believes that they have rational reasons for feeling the way they do and acting the way they do and making the choices that they do, and somebody that's just representing their membership of a group and wanting to be a part of a group and seen to be part of a group and share the values of that group. Those two things are very different, but they often look the same if we're not careful. And yeah, I think it. So I totally feel that we do have to justify our opinions. We can't just have them because we want them. We do, to ourselves as much as anything else, I think, have to rationalize them. But it sounds really awesome that you've spent a lot of time reflecting on arguments from the other side and also unpacking your own feelings on this, because I think that's a really critical first step to having a better conversation with somebody who disagrees with you.
Yeah, it's actually dare I say it, it's quite fun, like creating the steel man and thinking of, because you have to, because at first, because I don't agree with this position, so you try and you don't make it sound as good as it could be, but you have to try and actually know, is this the best that this person can do? No, it's not. They could go further. Let's really strengthen the argument. Let's look at everything,
right?
And unpack everything. Let's not be lazy about this. Let's do some research,
Yeah.
So I've been trying to I've started that project this weekend and see where it leads.
That's awesome. It's fascinating. We were talking about this in the live stream I did last night. It was a really great conversation we did on the back of the Roe v. Wade decision in America, which is obviously quite a controversial and difficult decision. And we were talking about this idea that there's a lot of fear wrapped up in sort of cultural shifts like that, and there's a lot of emotion, and when fear and emotion kick in, like, communication breaks down very dramatically, and therefore, at the time where it's the most important, we're least able to communicate effectively. And one of the critical ways of communicating effectively has to be empathy for the other person you're speaking to. You have to really, at least understand why they might be holding this very directly opposing view. And when it's an emotionally charged issue, as Roe v. Wade certainly is, and we're certainly not poor for, we have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to controversial, hot button, divisive topics these days. That we really tend to be very. We find it very difficult to empathize with the people that hold these other views. We find it incredibly difficult. And one of the things I think genuinely creates this barrier is that I think people fear trying to understand the other side. And I think this idea that it might be scary for you, thinking, well, as a vegan, as somebody who genuinely believes it and has tied my sort of identity in some ways, or has previously tied my identity in some ways to this idea, I'm actually quite scared to explore this other view, because what if I discover, well, I've been wrong all this time? That would be unpleasant. I don't think I'd enjoy that, to discover that I've been wrong all this time. And then what if I start eating meat, and I don't want to eat meat because I don't want to be that person, because I've decided that those people are horrible. It's the same thought people might feel like, I don't want to try and empathize with this racist person, because what if I start to become racist? I think it's a revulsion to even contemplate seeing the other person's side of the argument. It's so damaging, and it's great to hear you put that effort in and do that, because it takes courage. I think.
I mean, for me, just the act of doing that is to steel man and to try and see the arguments from the other side, clearly, and to really just go for it. Don't hold back. Just try and strengthen them as much as you can. It's actually a little bit not cathartic, but it's a bit of it's kind of like a release. It's like, just you let your guard down. It's like, I can just relax, kind of thing. Whereas if you're tied to this identity and you're really scared that you're going to go to the opposition, then you're holding a lot of tension, I think, and a lot of pain, suffering. You're suffering, So yeah,
you are. That's very.
I don't
true.
want to suffer anymore. So yeah, Yeah.
That's good. No, I that's a lovely way of thinking about it. Yeah, I think it also suggests that you suspect you might be wrong, but you don't want to find out if that's true. Like it suggests that you're not confident in your own position. You know, it suggests that you don't feel that you've really got good reasons for holding a certain view, right? And if we're aware that we aren't really sure why we think something, we can be even more fearful, I think, of how we might respond to arguments from the other side if we were really to honestly try to engage with them. And again, all of this means that people are just la la la, I'm not listening when it comes to the arguments from the other side, because they not only have already decided that they're wrong and must be motivated by terrible, evil, nefarious reasons, but also they're scared about thinking even for a second, what if they're right? Of course, this also belabors another problem, which is that it always feels like it's a binary.
Yeah.
Like arguments, especially these divisive ones, feel like you're either with us or against us. It's us versus them. And actually human beings don't live in this binary space. We have very complex and nuanced reactions and relationships with the world. And yet these arguments can make it very quickly feel like it's a binary thing. My gracious, this is a great topic, by the way. I really enjoyed this conversation. So, but there was some other things you mentioned when we discussed doing this interview that I would like to get into a little bit. You mentioned you had some experience with an MLM, a multi-level marketing scheme. Is that right? I really don't want to hear about that because those things are just really interesting. So, yeah, could you give me could you give me a thumbnail?
Yeah, back in 2012, 11, 12. Yeah, I was in a multi marketing. I can't remember.
Multi-level
That's it.
marketing?
Yeah, a pyramid scheme basically,
Pyramid
where
scheme.
it was Herbalife.
Oh
Yeah.
wow! At least that's a classic.
Yeah. So I kind of recognized after I sort of gave it all up that, and more so recently because I've been looking at and hearing some other people's experiences of these things, that you are kind of being scammed in a way, and it is a cult. There's all the hallmarks of kind of like cult behavior
Yeah.
with them. You know, like the the events, the extravagant events that they take you to, and like, oh, look how much money that you can make. You know, like this millionaire, he's made so much money from off the back of Herbalife. Look, all these cars and yachts and things like this. But you know, they have all these downstreams, people underneath them that are making them all the money. You know, like, and people like myself who actually I got into a lot of debt from it. I didn't make any money. I actually lost more money than I made trying to sell all these products to, you know, like friends and family and stuff like that. But it's yeah, it was totally sold to me like that you will make loads of money. You're going to be the best version of yourself, and you know, like here's some educational tools to improve your communication, and you know, like to be a better salesperson and things like this. And when you compare that to like Scientology or something like that, that's quite similar. You know? Yes, that was a bit of an experience for me. But I was doing that for like a couple of years, and I think I got to like I can't remember the names of the levels, but like 3. I was on tier 3 or something. So I had 2 lines underneath me of people working for me, making me money that I didn't make any money back myself with. So
it's horrible. They are very good at what they do. They're very good at selling the dreams and selling the feeling of being, you know, successful and owning your own company and being your own boss, and you know, they've weaponized that sales pitch essentially. What did you how did you come to sort of let it go and sort of walk, because you kind of have to walk away, right? And there's no victory condition here. So what inspired you to walk away? How did you manage to sort of leave? Because it's hard. I can imagine how hard it must
yeah,
be.
it was hard because obviously my upline, you call them, it was like, well, you know, you're not working hard enough. You need to work hard. Like the reason you're not doing very well is because you're just not doing it, going hard enough. You need to try harder. You know, so they were quite upset with me. I kind of I just gradually drifted off, and just wanted to try and find something else that I was interested in. And
Mm.
And then I became vegan as well. So I was like, oh, most of these products I can't take because they're not vegan for me anymore. So
Oh,
it would be
interesting.
immoral for me to sell these now. Um, and then
That's
everything kind of
interesting.
just gradually fell off to the point where I felt comfortable just cutting my ties with it in a way. So it wasn't as bad as, say, like, the Scientologists, where they go after you for years and they build up this
Right.
whole archive of information that they can use against you at any time. It's not quite as bad as that, but
No, there are definitely
yeah,
worse cults to be a member of for sure. But yeah, the sunk cost problem is a massive one in these MLM schemes, because you pay for all the items up front, right? You're paying your upstream provider for these items, and then you're selling them again downstream, and like they encourage you to bind a lot of financial investment up in stock, and there's just no. Yeah, there's just no way around that. That's a huge problem that you need to solve, and the only way you can feel like you can solve it is by, well, actually, what they tend to do is encourage you to buy more, because the bigger, I don't know if this is how it worked at Herbalife, but I know a lot of them, they will operate, the more you buy, the more of a discount you get. So
yeah.
it feels like you're saving money by investing more. But then, of course, you've got a huge amount of product that you can't shift, because it turns out there's an awful lot of other people selling this stuff, and the market's not that big. Yeah.
Everyone at that time was doing Herbalife as well, like to lose weight quickly for summer. It was just, at the time, it was, I don't know, I don't
Mm,
really see it anymore. It's not so prevalent anymore. I get, maybe people have just sort of cottoned on to the fact that it's kind of unethical, I guess. And then
yeah.
now there's Huel anyway, which is another meal replacement you could just buy in the supermarket or just order straight from online. You don't have to get it from a distributor or anything
Right.
like that. So I guess that might play a little bit into it. There's
Yeah.
also this thing of, as a representative of them, you're kind of you're kind of representing yourself as an expert in health and nutrition, but you don't have any qualifications. I actually did, because I used to be a personal trainer, so I actually did. I could say, with kind of some authority, I guess, whether something's nutritionally good for you or not, I guess. But most people
Mm,
don't have that, but they sort of portray themselves as some kind of air of authority, because of the,
mm,
the company tell you, basically they give you a script of what to say, like why this is the best thing, and you, like, it's better than food itself. You can't get all this nutrition, and
mm.
you'd have to eat all these list of ingredients to get the same nutritional value and the same meal. So why would you, like,
Yeah.
it just makes sense to buy this.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I think is really really interesting about this is that this is the it's the shutting down of the questions that's interesting to me, because you've only really got to ask one question of an MLM scheme. I don't know why I can't say it.
Mil-
Which is that if it is so successful, why do you need to sell it like this? Why if the profitability of this product is so obviously there, and the success of this product is so obviously there, why would you pay me some commission on it, and somebody else commission on it, and somebody else commission? Why would you not just retail this through Amazon and make a profit, and just make all of the profit? Because that would maximize your profit. It would give you the delivery chain, or not even just, maybe even through Amazon, and just any odd regular store. Why would you not sell this through retail? Did you ever ask that question, and do they have an answer for it?
No, I didn't. But it didn't really occur to me, because I don't know at the time. Did they have? I don't know whether they had stuff like Amazon codes and stuff like that you could use. I don't know if that was around at the time, or maybe I just didn't know. So it just
Mm.
didn't occur to me, I
No,
guess.
no idea.
Uh, yeah, and I don't know whether maybe I was just
It,
naive at the time. Yeah, no.
Oh, but they're incredibly good at selling you that dream.
Yeah,
They're incredibly good at making you feel like this is a no-brainer. It makes total sense. But it's like the idea of it being too good to be true. It's like, why isn't everybody doing this if it's such a
yeah,
great idea? If it's so easy to make money. I mean, I think but for a lot of people, I think it's totally the only way that they get the sense of their spider sense is tingling when they've encounter something like this, is that they've gone through something similar before. painful and hopefully not too expensive lesson, but it can be very debilitating for a lot of people. And I know some people that are falling for these things, as we, I know people that are currently starting out on their journey in an MLM or a pyramid scheme thing, and there's just nothing I can say to them that's going to seemingly get them to notice that this isn't good, because they want to buy the dream. It's so yeah. I don't hope I don't want to make you feel too bad for falling for it, because they've gotten super good at doing this stuff and selling you this idea. So yeah, it's just unfortunate that they're allowed to exist. Well, they're not. I mean, they're illegal. I mean, in this country especially, their pyramid schemes are illegal, and they have to operate within a very specific set of parameters. But I think it's, yeah, I don't know how they're still allowed to operate. So I assume that there's some sort of loopholes and things that they're using at the moment.
There's got to be, yeah. We'll just call it MLM. We'll just call it MILM. Shall we?
MILM. Why can we both not say that? That's really weird.
It's difficult, yeah.
I'm wondering if it's like yawning. You know, when you see somebody yawning and then like you yawn too. Like, I'm wondering if I saw you struggle with it, and now my brain's like, maybe it's weird, and you need to be careful when you say it. And then it's like, oh wait, I'm being too careful now. I'm overthinking it, and it's like, oh.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
That's my personal theory. So yeah, so I think one of the things that's really interesting about SE is just encourages with the idea of asking questions about everything all the time, and the idea that asking a question is not rude or offensive or harmful. That you can just never. It's never not a good idea to. It's never not a good idea. It's never not a good idea to ask more questions about everything. I think, yeah, for sure. So yeah, how do you feel about your do you have friends that are still in the MLM space and are still doing it?
I don't know anyone now, no. It's just been so many years. I think everyone's just doing something else now. I mean, maybe right. The upline, I don't know if I don't even know if they are anymore, to be honest. Yeah, I'm a hooligan now. If you know what it is.
A hooligan. So this is Huel, the food replacement supplement that they say is not a food replacement supplement, as in they're saying you shouldn't let it replace food for you. So do you resell Huel, or are you just a consumer of Huel? I just wanted to check.
Yeah, you could just order it online at your leisure. You don't have to sell it to anyone else or do anything. It's convenient.
Fair enough.
If
it turns out that's a perfectly viable way to sell things and make a profit as a company. I don't know. That's awesome. So Huel is vegan friendly. I suppose it must be. It's just mostly just materials and oats and things, right? That's I hadn't really thought about Huel being vegan friendly. Yeah, Huel is interesting. I've had Huel. I've tried Huel. It becomes. Do you have it for every meal?
No.
Are you a 100% Hueler? So you just do it for occasional meals? Is that
normally
how you
breakfast?
Do it?
That's about it.
Normally is breakfast. Okay,
it's just a nice milkshake.
It's a lower energy. Yeah, absolutely. Do you go for the chocolate flavored ones? Like there was like chocolate flavoring, banana flavored, like things you can put into it. Is that do they taste better than they used to? Because they used to taste like garbage.
It's something that you get used to. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not as nice as real food, I guess, but it's convenient. Yeah.
As nice as I definitely get the convenience. I think one of the main reasons that it's interesting, because the sort of genesis of Huel came about that there was an engineer that was basically trying to do. He clearly works the way my brain works, which is like he just wanted to solve the problem of food, because food was really time consuming and annoying and just got in the way. And it was just like, how can we just optimize for food? Like, I really liked the idea. I think the problem I've heard is that nutritionally it doesn't work, and even now Huel are saying this isn't a food replacement thing. It's just it doesn't replace all of your meals. Although they did originally sort of set out with that goal that it was going to be you could be on Huel only diet for weeks and weeks and weeks and it'll be perfectly fine. But I just don't think that's been demonstrated to be accurate.
I don't think so either. Yeah, I'm not under any illusion.
Awesome.
I'm not really a hooligan.
So what has been not really
you've changed my mind.
I've changed my mind. So since you joined the SE community, what do you feel about it? Like, do you think it's a positive thing? Do you think there's problems? Do you see it as a good community, or do you see it as just a bunch of people trying to convert everybody to atheism? That's a common argument.
Yeah, no, I did think it might be that at first with the atheism thing, but I'm happy to see that there is a bit more diversity now, I think, of diverse thought in terms of, atheism and theism in the same server. It would be good to have, more of that diversity, I think, because I know, I understand that SE came from, what was his name? Great atheist, that one, yeah. And yeah, I remember reading that book. I think it was 2017 or something. But it's the style of SE that we see these days is completely changed, doesn't it? So I understand it. Yeah,
I think
it seems
so,
a lot more different to the manual. I think so. Yeah.
Has religion ever played a part in your life at all?
No, not at all. So this is another thing that surprises. Well, it's not really a surprise, but yeah, I'm from the UK. I've grown up in a secular kind of society, so I've never really. Primary school, I think we had to, go to church and sing hymns and things like that because I'm of that era. But yeah, like. It's really foreign to me, with Americans, like how religious they are in some parts. It's just really strange to me. I can't really get my head around it, but I can kind of understand it because if I'd have grown up, with Herbalife or something, and in that cult, throughout my whole life, and then having to break free from it, I can kind of understand it from that perspective, how it could be a central, integral part of your identity, and it's be really hard to break away from, and if your whole family are religious, and how they would take that if you started believing.
I think they'd have a much harder time trying to understand how we could operate without it. I think than we. I think I agree. I think I can. It seems strange to me, but I can understand how they could be brought up to believe that this is critical and vital, and conflate it with all kinds of things that you need to do as a human being, and the way you might live your life is connected to this religious idea. But so I think we see that kind of thing all the time all over the world. But I think if you're in one of those systems, I think it must be incredibly difficult to see, well, what do you mean you've never had a religion? You've always been an atheist, and what do you mean that this isn't part of your society? Like, it just seemed, I can imagine that would be very, very strange for them. I'm glad you reflected on the primary school thing, because I think that was the road. How did you feel about religion when you were at primary school? Because I used to confuse the shit out of me. I don't know about you, but
quite strange, like the assemblies at school. I don't know if are they called assemblies in America as well? Like a little gathering in a room, where you have to sit cross-legged and listen to the teacher. And our assemblies were full of prayers and hymns and things like that. I like singing the hymns. I like singing and choirs and things like that. But the hymns didn't really make very much sense to me. At school, I think there wasn't really any religious kids there either. There was one particular kid though that I remember that her family were really religious, and she went to Sunday school, and she tried to encourage us all to go to this Sunday school and stuff. And I feel really bad, but we used to sort of take the mick out of her, and not, just take the mick out, like, oh, you believe in God? Like, that's so silly. Like, why do you think God is real? Or why do you think he exists? You can't see God, like, what are you talking about? So.
Early street epistemology was a brutal affair. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's so weird that we were, because that's the thing. I never really noticed the religiosity of my school, because of course you wouldn't. I've only ever experienced one school, and so and one way things are done, and it seems that all things bright and beautiful. It just that, oh God, just the thought of that hymn just makes me skin crawl. But now it's like, I look back at it and realize, why were we singing those things? Why were we saying those things? Why were we praying in the morning and praying in the afternoon and praying before dinner? Why was there a choir, and why were all the songs that we sung praising God and being religious? It seemed like an echo of a bygone age, and it was weirdly present in my life, and it was only later when I read The God Delusion, which I read only because it seemed like it was a controversial book, and therefore I thought, oh, what's this about? Everybody's all up in arms about this book, and let's have a look at it. And it was only when I started to read that I reflected back and noticed, actually, even though I've been an atheist my whole life, religion actually had an awful lot of say over what I did, especially in primary school, but even subsequently. And there was lots of places where religion had some say in my world. But yeah, it's such a weird thing to look back on. But yeah, they were there singing hymns we would have nativity plays. We would recreate Jesus at Christmas. I mean, it's just such a weird thing now. It's like I was an atheist in church. It was odd. So as you've grown up, then do you feel like have you ever contemplated a religious worldview? Have you ever flirted with it? Have you ever been intrigued by any particular religious narratives?
I think I did, yeah, a little bit, maybe in my 20s, because I was just inspired, like the people that are like born again and they've come from like a really shady past or whatever, and then they sort of rebirth, regenerate, hallelujah kind of thing, and then they're just really doing good with their lives afterwards. So I was kind of inspired by those sorts of people, and I thought, oh, maybe maybe
Right.
Jesus could be the answer. Like I want to be a better person. But I never really sort of went any further than that. I was just kind of like inspired by people like that, I guess. Not to name anyone in particular.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
Did you ever find the sort of youth groups going around? When I was growing up, there were after primary school and sort of during sort of secondary school, there were, and actually even later in life, there were lots of these sort of youth groups popping up in churches where they would just say, come along, hang out. We've got a pool table. There's a band, and you can play music, and and maybe just whatever. We might go in this room and pray for a bit. Whatever, man. It's super groovy and it's all cool.
Yeah.
And they were really trying to appeal to the younger generations. Did you have that?
Yeah, the girl from the school got me, like, I went to one of them. I can't remember how long I went there for. It was a few weeks, every Thursday, because they had good facilities. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
It was just something to do, basically. There wasn't really any other youth group that wasn't that. So I lived in a very sort of isolated village. There was hardly anything to do. So yeah, I remember that. I think I was I was about 7 or 8 or something like that. 7, 8, 9, that sort of age.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, at one point, our next door neighbor was a local vicar, and at one point they decided I should join the local choir. So I think I went twice in my life to a choir practice and was offered a place in the local choir, but luckily just. I don't exactly know. There's no point where I recall specifically rejecting it and saying I'm not going back again. But I think they just got the idea that I was just not interested at all in doing this. So, but yeah, so William could have been a choir boy at some point if he hadn't sidestepped it. That's cool. So when you so going sort of, sorry, I keep getting away from the SE thing, but it's fine. I like these conversations. With regards to SE, what has been the sort of most interesting conversations you've heard and you've had? What has been? Have you ever had a one that's really sort of changed your mind on something, or have you ever had a really good, interesting conversation where you think you've had a really good impact with somebody?
I haven't had too many yet, but the ones I have had, have been quite impactful and have got me thinking. Both being the interlocutor and the questioner has got me thinking. But both are really do a lot for me. Not just asking being the interlocutor. One thing that I've kind of parked for a while, sort of like a belief I can't remember what my confidence level was on this one, but the MBTI personality um,
Oh, right.
thing. I believe that I was this particular, what do you call it, personality type.
Personality
That's
type,
the,
yeah.
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 So I think I was, yeah, somebody questioned me on that, and got me thinking, well, actually, could it change over time? Is there any evidence to show that it stays the same over the course of your life? And so
Mm.
so I've kind of parked that for a while now. I'm holding that in real light regard at the minute, because I'm not, and I just hadn't really had the motivation. I just haven't had the time. I couldn't be bothered to sort of like go and look and research it further. So I don't really use it anymore. I've just sort of parked it for now, and then look at that later. So that was quite impactful.
That's awesome. I really like the idea that you're right. It's a sort of a two-way thing. Just once you start encouraging other people to think and have these conversations and encourage them to reflect, you can't not help but be more introspective, I think,
Yeah.
and more reflective of your own positions. I think people have talked about doing SE on yourself. I'm not sure I necessarily think that that's what's happening, but I think there is a sort of feedback mechanism where you can't spend all your time trying to encourage people to notice maybe why they might believe something for bad reasons, and then not take some time to apply that same logic to yourself. And I've definitely found it interesting, and I found myself sort of SE claims that I might make in my head, and saying, well, okay, why do I think that though? Really, like, honest, like, and it's just that's such an emancipating thing. Yeah, really
I
enjoyed
think
it.
a lot of claims, or a lot of beliefs that we have, we believe them just because they do make us feel good. Um, and like with the MBTI, it kind of makes me feel good about myself. I know a little bit more about myself. I'd like to delve deeper,
Mm,
like understand my brain a little bit more. So that I feel like that was my main motivation, and that's perhaps not the best way to come to a conclusion. It's not the best way to come to a conclusion.
yes.
You have to sort of slow down a little bit and just let's unpack it. Before we start sort of citing it and using it. Yeah.
Strangely, the same motivation people might have for believing in star signs and tarot cards, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a sort of inbuilt desire to want things to be true, and we are certainly less critical of trying to understand whether we have good reasons to believe something if we also want it to be true. The motivated reasoning component is strong.
Yeah, and it's
It's,
sorry, go on.
it's like a
With the star signs, I don't know about you, but when people come up to you and say, "Oh, what star sign are you?" and I don't really believe in it. I don't tell them that. I just say, "Oh, I'm, Capricorn or whatever," and they're like, "Oh, you're this, that, and the other. You've got, you're brilliant at this, so you're not so good at this." I'm like, you can say that about anyone, though.
yeah, I know.
And
I know.
you don't even
Yeah.
know me. Like what? But I don't know how to really sort of like deal with those kinds of conversations yet. But yeah, using the SE would probably.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
what makes you think that? How do you know that that's true? Like, how do you, and then, oh, because every time I've asked it, I've always proved it to be okay. Well, but have you ever tried to say the same thing to somebody and give them deliberately the wrong one and seen if they've thought that was true as well? Like, there's a lot. It's funny actually. I'm this afternoon I'm interviewing a lady who does tarot card readings, and I'm really looking forward to sort of exploring that position, because it's a fascinating thing, phenomenon in society. I with the kind of casual stuff where people make these sort of assertions about tarot cards, I kind of refer to them as like micro bullshits because it's such a little claim in a sense. It's not really impactful, and it feels like it's kind of not really. It's a bit like people saying, I'm quite spiritual. Like, what does that actually mean? Like, really, if you just stop for a second, explain to me, what does that actually mean? It actually doesn't mean anything, really. It usually just means that I believe some things for really bad reasons. But when people say that, it's like it's such a small thing that it feels like it would be really, you'd have to be highly disagreeable to want to challenge them on that. Just let them have it. Just, it's fine. But I think a lot of the time when we do that, we're kind of creating spaces for people to maintain these beliefs and these positions. And that's not to say, just be super clear, I don't think people should always have to challenge everybody all the time. But I do think it's worth noticing when we we choose not to challenge certain very small ideas, when actually maybe it might be really interesting to ask respectfully, and like using sort of the tools of SE, why do you think you're spiritual? Why do you think that my zodiac sign will tell you something about me as a human being? Like, what is that reason? And you don't have to be aggressive, and you don't have to force them to admit that they were wrong, but because none of that's in SE. The real question is just, can you ask them a question to make them think about why they just said to you what they just said? I think that's awesome.
Yeah, well, just to add to that, I
Cool.
think what people do like to talk about their interests. So if you just were asking them, oh, what makes you think that you're spiritual? What does spiritual mean to you? And things like that, then, it doesn't feel aggressive in any way, and people would probably love to talk about it. And you might be
It's
getting
true.
them to unpack something that they haven't even thought of before, because they just haven't been asked those sorts of questions before, because people in the past have just sort of like, it's a given, okay, whatever, like, I'll
Yeah.
just listen to what you
Yeah.
have to
True.
say. So yeah, I think I agree with you. Like,
Yeah.
here's a way to respectfully challenge, and I think we should probably do that more often.
Yes, I think we should, and even with the little things, I think the little things that feel like, in fact, sometimes it's the little things that maybe are easier to address in some ways, because it might be less obviously if it's usually an innocuous kind of statement and it doesn't feel like it's controversial, it might feel less like conflict when you respectfully ask them why they think that. Somebody says to you, oh, I'm kind of spiritual. Well, why do you think that? What are your reasons for thinking that? Oh, I just kind of have feelings sometimes. Do you think other people might have feelings? How do you distinguish between these spiritual feelings and these non-spiritual feelings? It's such a great way. I think you can have probably quite an impactful conversation, because I think maybe when somebody makes a more controversial statement, or one that they're used to being challenged on, maybe they're automatically more defensive. But when they're making this sort of innocuous statement, which they're not used to being challenged on, maybe you can actually encourage them to reflect a little bit more effectively. But yeah, it's great. Love it. So Emma, I wanted to ask, as one thing that's kind of come up quite often and has been talked about a bit recently, is the idea of women in the SE community, and female voices in the SE community, and the kind of general absence of that. And it's something I know Lisa from Road to Reflection has been sort of talking about quite a bit, and has interviewed some sort of women in the SE community. Sort of as a female voice in this community, do you feel do you feel, what sense of that do you have? Do you feel that there are reasons why maybe more women aren't interacting with SE, or do you feel that the community has things that it needs to learn about, sort of making itself more open and available to people?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's not really something I've really thought about before. I think uh, there's a lot less female voices in many kind of, I don't know if SE, whether you'd call it philosophical spheres, I get, epistemology.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not really sure why that is, to be honest. I guess I've always been sort of that way inclined, well, not always, but more recently. So I think the older I get as well, the more confidence I have, and like just self-esteem is better. So I just don't really care what people think of me, like as much as I used to.
That's it.
Stuff like that could play into it as well, potentially. I don't. So I worry about, oh, do I sound stupid or something? Stuff like that. It potentially could be some things. Just sort of just plucking things out of my head, but yeah.
No, that's fine. Yeah, totally. I love that, because that's exactly what I was going to say. Is like, it's not so much that I'm smarter now that I'm older. I just care less about what other people think, and I think that gives you the confidence to do an awful lot of things that you might otherwise be hesitant to do.
Yeah, I think so. That with the confidence thing as well. So there's two types of confidence, right? There's the sort of the confidence where you just exude, like I'm fine with myself. I can hold myself confidently. There's that kind of confidence, which I struggled with in the past. And then there's also the confidence with epistemology, like how confident are you about this particular subject? Like sort of like more epistemological kind of confidence. And I think that the two sometimes get conflated, don't they? Especially when somebody holds for instance, somebody holds a belief, and they they have to appear like they're really confident, they're 100% on this claim, and they can't back out of that. There's that kind of confidence as well, isn't there?
Yeah, that's true. I definitely feel, yes, you're right. So there's what we might call self-confidence, perhaps, and then there's what we might call domain confidence, like confidence about a very specific set of things that you're wanting to interact with, whether it's philosophy, SE, or a particular claim or belief that you have. Yeah, those are definitely very different types of confidence. And I think self-confidence is probably the most valuable, because I think with enough self-confidence, you can survive the consequences of a lack of domain confidence.
Yeah.
So I think that's that, but it's hard to I think a lot of people are very uncomfortable talking online in the first instance, and secondarily very uncomfortable about talking about complicated things online, and then thirdly maybe talking about things that are complicated and directly affect them and directly might challenge the way they feel about the world. And those two things can be hugely intimidating.
Yeah, especially if you don't know a lot about a subject. Do you have the self-confidence to say, I'm not confident about this thing, I don't know enough about it? Right. Because maybe online, maybe there is this perception as if you talk about something, you should have a good knowledge about the subject and you shouldn't be talking about it otherwise, But I think, and I think, unless you're if you're a politician, then you might have to. I mean, people vote for. I saw your video yesterday with the two. I can't remember the names. You were talking about this, with the political sphere. I don't really know that much about politics, so I couldn't really delve into it too deeper. But I do know, I'm aware that politicians have this kind of overconfident kind of attitude about things. They can't impart with that because they can't be seen to sort of change their minds as much. But I think people, if you do change your mind about something, I think people that commands a lot of respect, in my opinion. But I could be wrong about that.
It doesn't in the public's, like me personally, for me it would totally, that the fact that you've for example you've gone through the MLM thing and come out the other end, and as somebody who's had that experience and is wiser, wouldn't necessarily do it again, and then the fact that you're doing this work of doing the hard reflections on your veganism beliefs, right? Not because you now are going to no longer be a vegan, but because you're genuinely trying to unpack that. That to me is just fucking courageous. I mean, it's hard. It's really hard because people have lots of reasons why they might fear this kind of audit, as we already discussed. But to me, I just think this is absolutely phenomenal and should be encouraged in society. But in general, you're not going to be thanked, I think, by your vegan community for doing this work, right? You're going to feel less of an ally and a member of that community, and so that's going to be concerning to you. And to admit that you've done something that was maybe not a great idea, and have had to learn the painful lesson of coming out, often has the consequence of making us feel like an idiot. And actually, what it should do is make us feel like we're growing and that we've gotten smarter and that we were better than we were yesterday. And that's a fucking amazing
Everyone
thing.
Makes mistakes. This is the thing. We're not perfect human beings, and like the only way that you can learn is by making mistakes. To be honest, like the life is just like a mistake after mistake, basically, until you die. It's just a series of mistakes. But hopefully, like through my learnings, I won't make as many in the future. Just learning to kind of step back and reflect, I think, is the one thing I've learned over the last few months, especially like I say, joining the SE community as well. It just gives you that space to kind of reflect that I don't really get anywhere else other than with my partner, or some close friends. It's just it's kind of, it just feels like a really safe environment, to do that.
Yeah, so that's very cool. Yeah, I hope it continues to be that. I do really want people to recognize that making mistakes is not a sign of weakness. I mean, acknowledging mistakes is making a mistake and then not recognizing it and not owning it, and then falling back into it again or something similar to it because you're just unwilling to learn the lesson. I mean, that would be a sign of weakness in my view. That means you're not you're not doing the necessary work to grow as a human being. But like anybody that's made a mistake, if you used to believe X and now you believe Y, maybe you're still wrong about Y. I mean, that's very probable, but hey, you're going to be much more open to the idea that you might be wrong about Y now, right? Because you've realized that you used to think X, and so I think that openness is what's critical. It's certainty is not a move that anybody can make, and we all we're all just making the best of what we can based on what we think we know, right? But anybody that says no, it has to be X, and there's no possible way that could be wrong, and I'm not even willing to consider arguments from the other side, that person is just flat wrong about that. Like even if they're not wrong about the conclusions of X, that there's no way they could be that confident or should be that confident in X. Yeah, sorry.
I wonder if there's something so in what you said there in regards of somebody that's like 100% or has to be 100% certain on something, whether there's any sort of correlation between that and anxiety. I'm just talking from personal experience. Yeah. Like I had, unless I was certain about something, there was this. What I'm trying to say is I feel like I'm less anxious these days. I used to really suffer with anxiety, and now it's not really too much of an issue. I know I can handle it. I still get anxious now and again, but I can breathe through it, and I can get into things or go into things without being anxious, but knowing that I'll be able to cope. Whereas before it's just like, oh God, I don't know what am I going to do? Like you just build up so much in your head without that absolute certainty. Yeah, so.
The pressure to try to be perfect on everything and be 100% correct, and that's unbearable. No human can sustain. It's one of the interesting characteristics of the Dunning-Kruger curve. People often talk about the sort of the overconfidence part. Are you familiar with Dunning-Kruger? Yeah. So people often talk about Dunning-Kruger in relationship to the overconfidence, the early super overconfidence phase, where you think you know all there is to know about a subject until you sort of crest the hill, and then you sort of fall into the valley of bleak despair, where you suddenly realize you basically all this time thought you were making loads of progress, and you now realize you now know like 2% of this entire subject matter, and you've got this huge amount of work ahead of you, and that can be very dispiriting. But the overconfidence early on is usually what people talk about when they talk about Dunning-Kruger. But there's another side of it, which is what happens at the other end of the spectrum, which is that the more when you really are an expert on a subject, when you really, really, really do know what you're talking about, you are massively less likely to strongly declare that you know what you're talking about. Like the more you really, really, really understand a subject, the less confident you will sound. And when you are expressing an opinion, you will make sure it's a very, very narrow opinion that you're expressing. So a scientist, for example, working on astrophysics or something, in astrophysics space, early astrophysicists, somebody that's just starting down their road of like looking at the stars and doing astrophysics calculations will say, I've really got a handle on astrophysics, right? Somebody who's spent 20 years in the field of astrophysics is really, really committed their life to it, would never make a statement like that. They do not have a handle on astrophysics, but they might know something really specific about this one celestial body that they really actually do have some data on and understand, and they might make a claim about knowing something about that. So one of the sort of the principal takeaway here is that actually the more you know, the less certain you are, but that's not a bad thing. And the more you're okay with that uncertainty, the more you can acknowledge that that's actually, Socrates, it goes back to Socrates, true knowledge is knowing you know nothing. Like recognizing that everything you know is almost certainly wrong is actually very emancipating, because it removes this burden of perfection and just gives you the right framework, which is, I just want to be less wrong than I was yesterday about something. And that's as good as I'm hoping for. Like, I'm never claiming anything I'm saying is perfect.
Yeah, I think, what I'm taking from what you say is like, so this person that has more and more knowledge, like the expert scientist, I think what probably tends to happen is that the more knowledge they acquire, the more they recognize that they don't know about the subject, and then their kind of sphere like expands even more, and then there's all this space left of actually there's all this stuff that I don't know yet. It's probably going to take me like 20 years to understand it, and I'll probably die before then. So, but you can only work with what you've got. You can only work with. Yeah.
how dumb a statement is, I know all of
Yeah.
science. I know I'm really good. I know science. Like when people make a statement like that, the one thing I know for sure is they know fuck all about science. It's just that no scientist, genuine scientist, would ever make the claim that they know science. Or, it's just, yeah, I think it's great. And I love the idea that you're tying that to confidence, because I think it is a huge thing that can undermine people's confidence is that other people sound like they really know what they're fucking talking about, and that can be very intimidating. But there's a very big difference between sounding like you know what you're talking about and actually really genuinely knowing what you're talking about. That's definitely worth noticing. And the other thing is, I like the metaphor of having strong opinions but holding on to them really lightly. Like everything I think that I will express confidently, I genuinely do believe, and I have, I think, a self internally consistent reason for believing. But I will let go of it in a second and won't worry about letting go of it. I'll be gleeful in letting go of it if somebody can demonstrate to me why I'm wrong about
Yeah.
it. And I think that's the trick. Is like, recognize that your opinions are all likely to be wrong. Like everything you believe about the world is likely to be wrong. And that's a hard thing to acknowledge. But if you recognize that, and then you can say, well, then I can't say anything. But no, there are things you can feel justified in thinking about the world. And you can express them as strongly as you like, but you need to let go of them the moment something comes along that genuinely causes you to reflect on the fact that maybe that's not true. And it's okay to jettison that belief.
Yeah, I totally
I've
agree
often,
with that.
sorry.
Yeah, I think it's just a better headspace to be in as well, just less stressful.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm all
100%.
about de-stressing.
I
Sorry,
did
go on.
want about de-stressing. Excuse me. I did just quickly want to return to that sort of idea of being a female voice in the SE
Yeah.
community. Is there any advice that you would give? Because like I don't see. I've wondered, genuinely reflected on whether or not there is anything that the SE community might do to improve, sort of communication with women and sort of making itself more accessible to wider demographics in any case. I do think there's probably a selection criteria where not only do you have to be confident enough to like become interested in SE and think that that's something that that you might want to get involved with, but then also join Discord, and then also not only join Discord but also become not just an anonymous text username on the system, because I mean we don't really know how many women are in NSC, but we do seem to have some reasonable estimations on how many people join the chat, the voice conversations, right? Because that's the only point where we can really
Yeah.
differentiate between maybe male and female personas in this space, and even that's not obviously very accurate, but like we get a sense of it not just from the people that are joining SE or being part of it, but the ones that are also confident enough to join a voice server, which is unnerving. It's scary for me to go to a random server and then join a random room and start talking to people on Discord. That makes me feel uncomfortable, and I talk a lot. And so that's a huge barrier as well. And then secondarily, being brave enough to turn your microphone off and actually speak. Just joining the thing is one thing, but unmuting your microphone and saying hello and intimidating. I think I can totally understand
Yeah,
that.
I think there's just more males on Discord anyway. That's just a given. So
Right.
you're always gonna get a smaller amount of females, I guess, in any server. But I guess in terms of like what I'd say in terms of advice for anyone thinking about doing SE, that is female, I guess one thing that you could do is maybe like just join the VC and just like listen to start off with and get a feel for it, and then just sort of like each week kind of
Yeah.
build on that. Maybe you might want to do like a claim instead of the questionnaire at first. Just sort of like maybe just incrementally build it up to the point where you
Ease
feel
into it.
comfortable, because it is a very forgiving community, especially with the practice sessions. It's you're
Yeah.
actively encouraged to do it if you've never done it before, and it can be very daunting for the first.
Mm.
Yeah, it can be very daunting for the first time. So maybe like the moderators or the host there. I think they already do this because I was on a session last week. I think you were there, where somebody just kind of like froze up because it just. I don't know. Maybe they just felt intimidated, but
Yeah.
it maybe just to say that just keep giving like pointers, maybe some suggestion questions, or have like even if it's just like a list of questions that you could go through sequentially, or using the SE practice guide. There's some really good questions on there that you could use. Just getting used to asking those questions, even if you're not getting any meaningful answers, or maybe just having one single goal, like not to change their minds in the first session, but just to try, and this is what I did personally, just try and understand and get your head around what they're saying and what their position is, and then being able to summarize it back to them. Even just practicing that is good enough, like it's more than good enough to start off with.
100%. It's funny. So we've been talking recently about like creating different types of practice sessions and making maybe some specifically available for very new people, where actually the only real goal is just to come off your microphone and say hello and introduce yourself, and maybe we have a chat about how to build rapport with people and how that can be effective, and that's basically just to get people started, because oh my god, it's so hard, it's so scary, like to join the practice sessions, and then the first time you ever get to try to practice doing SE, you're now doing it in a room full of strangers, and there's like 20 people listening to everything you're saying, and it's scary. It's really intimidating. And I completely understand why people might be hesitant. But at the same time, I would agree, it's probably the best place to start, because it's a space where we're trying to specifically give people feedback and encourage them to do it. Excuse me, hay fever is kicking my butt. Hate plants, hate all plants. So yeah, I think that's great. One thing that's really interesting to me is that I almost have at the moment something nearly 50-50 in terms of male female voices in my community interviews, and I promise I've not done that deliberately. That's and in fact, actually, prior to this interview earlier this week, unfortunately, they're not very well, but I was going to interview Jack from the SE practice sessions as well. So I was almost going to be actually having more female voices in my interviews than male voices, and I think it definitely shows that there is a female presence, and I think the absence of the visibility of that might, when you join the chat rooms, I think there's the very high likelihood that it's going to be a majority, certainly of male voices, might lead you to think something about the community that I don't think is entirely true. That I think there are plenty of female voices like yourself and like Jack and like Starlight. We want to Starlight, and and just Lisa and myriad other people. And I think the idea that we do have increasingly, it seems or feels, confident women participating in these spaces, I think is just hugely encouraging. And so yeah, you wouldn't be alone if you were to try to join these sessions and speak up.
Well, I will actively try and come into more practice sessions and be a female presence to try and actively encourage others to do the same. Yeah,
I think everybody's just a human presence. I really hate thinking about people like that. Like, it's just people, and I don't think we need to set quotas and things. But I can understand how it might feel like, like you said, like women don't tend to engage with philosophy as a topic very often, or at least not so. It doesn't feel that way, so maybe it's just a visibility issue, but it seems less common a topic of interest. But I also feel like framing SE as philosophy, as it undoubtedly does get framed, I think is really intimidating, because I know for a fact many times in my life, if somebody had said, "Hey, would you like to come to this group? We talk about philosophy," I'd be like, "Hell no! That sounds like way, academic and very much out of my familiarity and comfort zone. Like, it's just an intimidating idea." So, regardless of gender, I think that that just even framing it in this way is really kind of often unhelpful, because I think it dissuades more people than it needs to.
Would you like to join a community where you would like to reflect on your beliefs? Maybe something like that. Or, I don't know, that'd be better.
Yeah. Well, no, not really, because I believe my beliefs and I don't want you challenging them. So why would I want that? It's part of the problem that I've mentioned to Anthony and Reed. We were talking about this, the idea that if you're going to go up to somebody in the street and say, with a clipboard and say, "Excuse me, do you have a moment to talk about your beliefs?" I would run a mile. Like, I'm so surprised at how many people actually do engage in these conversations, because to me, I would immediately label that person, at the very least, he's a Scientologist, right? Maybe a Scientologist, or he's recruiting for the Jehovah's Witnesses, or some political scheme. He's basically going to get me to want to sign something or pay some money towards something at the end of the conversation, or maybe buy a holiday timeshare or something like that. But my motives are the last thing on my list of possible motives are that he actually wants to have an honest conversation with me.
Yeah,
like that's the very last thing on that list.
Yeah, for sure. Especially like the clipboard thing. I think I've been thinking about doing some myself, going out there and maybe filming a little bit, but I think I'd be more comfortable sitting down with the microphones, and I got this one, but it's not very good, as you can tell.
We're going to go read
style. I could just maybe like grab one of the picnic benches in the park or something, and then that could be the seated area. I think that feels more comfortable for people to come and sit down, have some kind of sign, like, I don't know, use something like what Reed would use.
We did a live stream talking to Reed and Anthony a couple of weeks back, where we talked about the different styles and approaches of SE and how you might get started doing real street interviews, which isn't necessary in SE. SE is not about those real interviews, although it's obviously what people see. And we talked about the difference between sitting down and standing up, and it seems to be sort of a bifurcation of different people's styles and approaches. Some people are saying, like, having Reed's stand with his little sign and everything, and his the fancy, makes it feel official and proper, and not just some rando with a clipboard asking weird questions. But at the same time, that might also make it feel much more intimidating and much more alarming, and put people on their guard a little bit more, maybe in a way that's not helpful to the conversation and all kinds of things. Whereas Anthony's sort of much more relaxed and much more sort of personable. It feels like a conversation, but also far too often they've got GoPros strapped to every limb, so that looks weird. It's like, but yeah, if you're thinking of getting started, that's a great video to go take a look at, because there's a lot of lots of little tips that I hadn't thought about in terms of like how I might approach going out and doing street interviews, which is something I'd like to do at some point also. But and I genuinely hope that you do it too, because in fact, actually, you're in the UK, so actually one of the weirdest things is maybe we could hook up and go do that together, because actually one of the things that I've been lamenting is the fact that the American community does this all the time, where they go out and do SE together, and I'm like, well, I always feel like I'm alone in the UK, but that's not true. There are definitely more UKers available out there. So yeah, that would be super cool.
I do actually have a GoPro. I never use it, but I'm not going to strap it to myself. No,
you have to strap it to
to your head.
It is. I was just I mean, I've seen people have the GoPro attached to their head, and that always looks ridiculous. Or the chest cam looks like you're about to do some extreme sport. I've seen people have multiple. Anyway, there's all kinds of different things around there. Emma, it's been absolutely a delight to talk to you. I sort of knew that this was going to be fun, so I'm not surprised, but I really did enjoy the conversation, and I really hope we get to talk more often, because I think it was super good fun to do it. Is there anything that would you ever be inspired to start a channel and sort of dive more into the SE, or are you still thinking that sort of exploring the different ways and if you were going to start a channel, more importantly, what would you call it?
Oh yeah, the name, isn't it? Oh, it's so hard to think of a name. But yeah, I'd probably I could start a YouTube channel. I think I'd be comfortable at first just filming it, and because you can upload the videos onto the Discord, can't you, and get people to review them there. So I'd probably start off of that first and see where that leads.
That's something we mentioned. Yeah, uploading it to YouTube, but doing it as an unlisted video so that nobody finds it unless you send them the link. That's a great way to get started and get feedback. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to give you this as a gift. I'm just throwing it out there. Epistemology.
That's a good one, yeah.
Right? It's right there. Run towards it. Run towards it. Emma, it's been absolutely brilliant. I really hope we'll speak again. But thank you so much for doing this, and we'll speak again soon, hopefully.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.